Michael has asked me to share my personal story with you today. Now, my personal story is only my own story, and I've had the privilege of meeting lots of you today that have your own personal stories. So with that, I hope that I can do the ME or the chronic fatigue diagnosis a bit of justice in just explaining where I came from. So with that, I was only about 14 years of age when things hit high water for me. So I come from a very competitive horse riding background, and I was competing with an Irish squad and so on and so forth. And I was very, very healthy the whole way up through my childhood, never a problem, never had to see a doctor for any reason at all. And one day I could feel my throat tightening, and I thought, right, there's something isn't right here. But I thought, you know what, put a brave face on, put a smile on your face and get on with it. So that's what I did for approximately about 2 weeks. And I went training then after having the best year that I had from winning all the titles that I could possibly win thereabouts that year. I brought my horses down for one last training session before the following season started. And at this stage, I was no longer able to feel what my body was doing. So my trainer was screaming and roaring at me, which would have never been common. And people were looking at each other thinking, God, there's really something wrong with her today. So I remember looking down at my legs, and what my brain was telling my body to do, my body wasn't corresponding at all. So I thought, right, for the sake of my pride, I'll pull this horse into the arena. And I said, I think there's something, wrong with the horse. So off I went with the horse and pulled another horse out. So that was that. I went into the arena with that horse then as well, and things just became worse and worse. At this stage, I was seeing 8 and 10 of everything, so I really thought we've got problems at this stage. So I came home and I decided it would probably be a great idea to ride out another horse. So with that, things dramatically took a spiral from there. I came in home, and at this stage I could barely swallow my own saliva, never mind breathe properly. So this side of my throat had closed over to this side, and the far side to the same side then as well. So I just excused myself from the dinner table and said I'd way too much homework to do, that I'd have it later. And long story short, 3 o'clock that morning I ended up in the care doctors. I refused to go to the hospital, and I was sent home with very high dosage painkillers. Without, my mother's consent or the doctor's consent. They did their best, but I refused. So I came home and I ended up in A&E at 4 o'clock that morning as well. And with that then, from there, they diagnosed some viruses, Epstein-Barr being the most prominent one, and that's just your glandular fever virus, which is very common in Ireland and very, very common through teenagers in particular. So with the glandular fever virus, instead of it just affecting the glands in my throat, it unfortunately went to my liver. So my liver had problems functioning to the best of its ability, followed by my kidneys, my spleen nearly ruptured, and then obviously that was a domino effect from there. So with that, I spent 7 months completely bedbound at home, reliant on my mother for absolutely everything. And for the first 2 months, the most damage was done in the sense that I wasn't able to drink or eat. So she used to crush up ice cubes to the size of your baby fingernail, and she'd pop them on my tongue and tilt my head back, and that was exactly how I stayed alive for those first 2 months period. Now, with that then, we took off on the medical routes, hopping from doctor to doctor and so on and so forth. But unfortunately, they were all scratching their heads and sending me from one to the other. So with that, after that 7-month period, I eventually began to be able to move again, which I thought, great, do you know what, fantastic, back to the horses, I'll go tomorrow. So with that, I pushed myself a little bit too hard. Hindsight is a great thing. Now, when I say push myself too hard, I meant I walked to the toilet and back again. And with that, I was then diagnosed with ME, or myalgic encephalomyelitis. Now, the definition of myalgic encephalomyelitis, or chronic fatigue syndrome, myalgic meaning muscle pain, and encephalomyelitis simply meaning swelling of the brain and the spinal cord. However, for lots of people, that can mean various different things. So the way that it's further defined is a complex physiological, neurological, and then as well an endocrine dysfunction. So for me then, my process was a lot of hormonal problems, a lot of skin problems. I also had a terrible loss of vision. So I wasn't able to focus on anything at all, and then it completely dissipated then altogether. Now with that then, my hearing was the only thing that over-exaggerated, and from there my speech even went. So at that stage then, after all the muscle wasting and after losing all the body weight and so on and so forth, my body found it very, very hard to be able to recuperate from there. So with that, we took very, very small steps and again went from doctor to doctor and specialist to specialist. And there was a huge war going on at home whether I should be continuing to go down the medical road or maybe seek some alternative help. So with that, my mother, thankfully, she's here with me today, and she's a fantastic woman. Excuse me. But with that, what we did is we decided, when I went back to one of the original doctors, he said to me, he said, look at Ellen, he says, you'll be lucky if you'll ever be able to move properly again, never mind get back to what you were able to do. So from there, I just simply decided if the doctors couldn't do anything for me, it was time to take my own health into my own hands. And at that stage then, we've seen every healer, every Reiki, every shamanism, every seventh son of a seventh son you can possibly imagine, from bioresonance to different magnetic therapies, to Ayurvedic, to acupuncture, and so on and so forth. And thankfully, some of them gave a little bit of justice to what I was doing, and then sometimes they were causing an overtoxicity of my body, which was diagnosed by blood tests and so on and so forth. So thankfully then, 2 years later, after being completely bedbound, I eventually met Michael, and from there, my life just completely changed. So I was always the type of a person to put a brave face on, and I was getting pretty sick of doctor after doctor telling me that I'd never be able to do what I'd hoped to do again. So Michael said, do you know what, Ellen? He said, you're the one that has the power. And I knew that deep down, but it wasn't until a specialist was able to diagnose that or to be able to instill that hope in me, I thought, thankfully, I've met somebody that can give me that bit of help, do you know? So with that, I continued treatment for 4 days and barely able to walk into Michael's clinic. I walked down the stairs with assistance the second day of treatment. Now, treatment is no quick fix. I continued treatment for at least 2 years, for 4 days, nearly every month. And if I was asked, was it worth it? I would most definitely go through it for 4 years if I thought that I'd be where I am today. So with that then, the recovery was slow and gradual. And in fact, after treatment, I could often feel a little bit worse. But Michael and Adrienne O'Connor, a fantastic therapist that's Dublin-based, they all reassured me that it was just everything releasing from my body. And sure enough, they were right. And continually, time after time, my body was slowly improving. So with that, my eyesight improved. I was able to speak again, a little bit shaky, but I was getting there. And with that then, the hormonal problems subsided. All my liver and kidney and every function that I had came right back up to where it should be as far as the medics were concerned. From there then, everything just hugely improved. I was able to put on weight again. I was able to put on muscle again. I was able to do a little bit of walking instead of being carried everywhere, and so on and so forth. So with that, there is not one thing to this day that hasn't completely recovered. And thankfully, I am back to my horse riding. I spend most of my time in the gym now, to be honest. I made the decision that I wouldn't go back horse riding competitively. I just do it for leisure, and I love that. But with that, I went on to study then with Michael, thankfully, and myself and Mary actually trained together. Then I went on to train with the College of Naturopathic Medicine, where I graduated with nutrition. So I set up my own clinic then in Wexford, and this is what I specialise in and work with on a daily basis. Now, why is myalgic encephalomyelitis or chronic fatigue becoming such a huge epidemic? As far as the Irish ME is concerned, this is a federation, the IMET of Ireland, and with that, as far as they're concerned, from what the doctors were able to email back to them on their survey, there's about 12,000 people throughout Ireland that are suffering. Now, my estimates would be much, much higher than that. In clinic, every day, aside from all the other calls we get, there's at least 20 calls on a daily basis, Saturday and Sunday included, if not more, that we get chronic fatigue after chronic fatigue after chronic fatigue state. And adrenal fatigue is something that's very, very overlooked in today's world, and Mary touched on that there as well, that with that, it's almost always can be guaranteed 9 out of 10 people you'll see in clinic will have some kind of a degree of adrenal fatigue, and it's up to the therapist that you're working with to be able to identify the severity of that, and then for everything else then to be combined with that there. So from that point onwards then, everybody thinks when you recover, God, great, sure, you're back walking again. But when you've been almost 4 years of your life and more bedbound, do you know, it's very, very difficult to integrate back into society. So it was at this point, not only through my recovery, that the mindset and the emotional techniques and all of the extra work that Michael and Adrienne had done with me, was I able to pull those out of the bag and bring me through the rest of my, do you know, whether it be integrating with people in college, whether it was something as simple as walking down the main street of my hometown, that instead of people going, oh my God, I haven't seen you in 4 years, what have you been doing, where have you been, do you know, and this shock and horror on their face, that I'm actually still here to tell the tale, that it was only those emotional techniques and that fantastic mindset that had been instilled in me that has me to where I am today. Now, I'm not an emotional person, as in I don't usually let my emotions out at all, and I've talked about my story thousands and thousands of times, but today is actually the first day that I've ever got any way emotional about it at all. But that's simply not just because of my own story, but because there's so many people in this room that are going through similar circumstances. And with that, the best thing you can do is to be able to take that first step. And you've made that first step by being able to come into the clinic here today, or to be able to come into this seminar. And with that, that's always the hardest decision you can possibly make, is to decide, yes, do you know what? I do really need that little bit of extra help. I can't do this by myself. And that's where the therapists come in, whether it's myself or Michael or Mary, that with that, it's not about us. It's never about us. It's about instilling the power in you, that you have the control to change whatever you want to change within every second of every day. So that if that's all you can take away with you from today, it's that you always have that power. Thank you.
When people come to my clinic, it is obvious that they are seeking help for their health issues. We try to keep it very simple. We explain that the body is made up of energy. If that energy becomes imbalanced, the body becomes ill. We explain to them the importance of their mindset. The need to change the mindset is very important for them. We need to teach them how to deal with their emotional stress. We need to engage them in a process of where they change their nutrition. When patients take the advice on board and implement the program that we put into place for them over a period of 4 days initially, they will recover. People need to realize that they have the power to change whatever is going on in their lives. What is stopping people from getting better is themselves. Our job is to get the energies flowing, get your mindset focused, educate you about your nutrition, make those changes, you will get better.